I have here just a cheap little soldering iron that has an XT60 adapter. It is made by Nylio, I believe, and it can be powered by 12 volts. And it's only 30 watts, but the best thing about this is it only costs 10 bucks. So if you're out in the field and you have a loose wire and you got to solder it back together, this $10 soldering iron could mean the difference between flying and going home. So I'm going to go ahead and test this out. I'm going to test it with a 2S Lipo to see if it'll actually heat up. Then I'm going to go ahead and test it out with a 3S. There is very little in the way of instructions here. First of all, most of it is in Chinese. Just on the back it just tells you kind of tips on how to solder. It doesn't tell you any specifications for this soldering iron other than it is 12 volts and 30 watts. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to plug this in with some Lipos, see if it'll heat up, and then I'm going to go ahead and see if it'll actually solder or desolder. So let's test it out. So the very first thing I'm going to do is just go ahead and open it up. I'm going to take this out. It seems like it's decently built and got a nice grip on it. The first thing I'm going to do is plug this into a little teeny 2S battery and see if it heats up. So I've got it ready here. I am going to plug it into a tiny little 2S Lipo and we're going to see if it heats up. So this is the first time I'm plugging it in. And I don't see any smoke. I don't smell any burning electronics, so it is definitely heating up. So I'm going to give it a minute and then we'll see how hot it gets. We'll see if it gets hot enough to solder on a 2S. It is getting hot. I don't even know what this is, but I'm going to see if it'll solder. So it is melting solder on 2S, which is good. That's a good sign. So I'm going to go ahead and see if it'll solder something. And it's melting the solder, which is good. So it is definitely working on 2S. Now that is absolutely great. If you are out in the field and you have a loose wire, that happened to me about a week ago. I had a loose power wire on my VTX. So without a soldering iron, I was kind of forced to go home. There was nothing that I could do. So now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and plug this into a 3S. I'm going to make sure that it can handle the 3S and I'll try soldering again with it. But if it solders on 2S, that's well worth it. That's all you really need is just a 2S Lipo and it solders just fine. So I'm going to go ahead, we'll see what happens with 3S right now. Alright, I am plugging in the 3S. And this is actually 12.4 volts, so it's plugged in. Nothing crazy happened. I'm going to leave it plugged in for a minute. Make sure that it doesn't burn out on a 3S. Fully charged is 12.4 volts, so it's just over the recommended 12 volts. So, I mean, it is hot. It's definitely working. It's melting the solder, no problem. It's actually working better on 3S than it did on 2S. It's definitely getting hotter. So I know that it's going to solder. So let me just grab this little miscellaneous board here. So it's desoldering just fine. It actually works really well on 3S. It's absolutely perfect. So I'm not going to go to 4S. It does specify 12 volts and there's very little documentation with this, so I'm not going any higher than 3S. It works absolutely perfect on 3S. I've had it plugged in for a few minutes now and nothing crazy is happening. It's definitely hot enough to melt solder. So let me go over the pros and cons for this little soldering iron. The pros are it has interchangeable tips, so you can swap it out, change it to a smaller one if you need to. It has an XT60 connector and it works with 2S and 3S Lipos. It's small enough to carry with you, and best of all, it's only 10 bucks. Some of the cons are it doesn't have an adjustable temperature and it can't handle 4S. So I think this is a great little soldering iron to carry with you every day. It's only 10 bucks, and if you've got a loose wire somewhere, you can just plug this thing in, resolder your wire, and you're good to go. So I'm going to leave a link in the description below for this little soldering iron. I think it's really neat. It's only 10 bucks at Race Day Quads, so check out the link. If you need a soldering iron that you can use out in the field, it's super cool. So I think it's well worth $10. So I hope this helps. Check it out, and thanks for watching.